This is Matt. I just wanted to put a quick trigger warning in the front of this episode. We will be going into multiple Game of Thrones scenes, including ones that revolve around sexual assault. So just wanted to put a trigger warning for sexual assault in front of this episode. Thank you, and have fun listening.
Just start recording and not tell us at first.
I thought he was going to start recording, honestly, on Dumpy, the origin story. I really thought that that's when he was going to start recording.
Is that the new Hulu documentary series, Dumpy, the origin story?
Very close. It's actually part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh, and it's just a lineup of asses, and you have to pick which one belongs to what superhero.
Yeah, you have to pick the true hero, and you get like very little context. Yeah,
that's America's ass. It's
America's ass.
I mean, do we already have an MCU Dumpy though? Is that Captain America's ass? Is that the MCU official Dumpy?
I honestly, that's who I was picturing when we went there. Yeah,
now that he's like an old man in the canon, like that's a wrinkly old ass. We don't want that.
I'm still holding on to young Captain America's ass. Literally on every movie poster. On every movie poster, if you look close enough, you will actually see me photoshopped hanging onto those cheeks for dear life.
By your mouth on some of them. I mean, I saw teeth. I saw teeth.
I had to get inventive. I was slipping. He's flipping and throwing that shield. Girl, I need to hold on.
I mean, they have to oil him up to get him in the suit, so of course you're gonna slip.
Of course.
You guys are nasty. I did start recording, and I got all of that on tape. And now everyone that listens to our podcast, all 5 of our listeners, are gonna judge the shit out of both of you.
Oh please, bitch! They're on the they're probably like salivating over the posters too of America's Dumpy.
I mean, after last week's episode, which isn't up because Matt didn't put it up yet, where I had a moment where I didn't want to say something on the podcast where I insinuated something, they already know I'm nasty.
Oh,
I was gonna say if me saying that is the nastiest thing on your podcast, I would kind of feel bad actually.
Oh, it's definitely not the nastiest.
We talked about the pipe.
I know. There's so much nastiness that you guys haven't unveiled. Are you kidding?
Yeah,
I forgot all about the cum pipe. And
so did America. And what's the third one?
And the gay pipe.
the gay pipe, yeah.
I totally forgot about that too.
There's so much overlap between those three. Honestly, the Venn diagram is very fucked up.
It's more like a spectrum at that point. It stopped being a Venn diagram and just became a spectrum.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What part of the spectrum are you on? I feel like I'm like half gay pipe, half cum pipe. I'm nowhere near the piss pipe though. Nowhere near it.
You don't pee.
No, I'm not about the piss pipe. I'm not about it.
I don't think I want to be part of the spectrum.
Could piss pipe and cum pipe just be euphemisms for a penis? In which case, I would envelop both of those because I love penis.
The silence killed me after that question.
Well, I feel like
if a man ever referred to his penis as one of those two in bed or something, I would immediately leave. I would jump out of my skin and my skeleton would just waltz out the room and leave.
I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't reference a female's genitalia.
Right, I was just saying pipe because of the shape,
Well, I mean,
it could be the same, just inverted. Inverted
yeah.
pipe.
And if you
Okay,
James.
People came to this episode to hear us talk about Game of Thrones, not to hear us talk about whatever the fuck we're talking about right now.
I really thought you were going to say the gay pipe.
People come here to hear us talk about the gay pipe.
So
if you
what are we doing?
What's that, Jackie?
What are we doing?
Oh my god, okay. If you haven't heard of the gay pipe, the cum pipe, and the piss pipe, go on Twitter and just look those up and see.
He went all the way back.
Secondly, yes, we are talking about Game of Thrones in this episode.
Wait, you didn't even intro us in.
Oh my god,
Wait,
you're
you
right.
didn't intro.
Oh, here, I'll do it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the What Do the Gays Think podcast. We're back with me, of course, Patrick, who has a, quote, maturing hairline, as the doctor said today. I'm joined by co-host with a maturing hairline as well, Matthew. Maturing in the best ways. How are you, Matt?
You bitch.
Okay. Also joining us today, once again, co-hosting joining in, basically owns part of this podcast. The lovely and the seeing if dyke is a good word for them, Jackie. And we can bleep that. We have the bleep budget now. So if you want me to bleep that word.
No, I think it should be left in. I think it should be left in so that people can understand that we are on a journey together. And also, just for the record, my hairline is not maturing. I just want that on record.
Right, because
I'm looking which people can't see, but I don't have. It's not maturing.
Yeah, I think there's a conversation we had because as men, me and Matt, gay men, we throw the word fag around like it's it's
religiously. We live and breathe fag.
I now basically do as well.
Right, and as a member of the queer community, go off work, boots the house down.
Fun gay slur.
Dyke is just such a. It's so maybe it's because it's that hard D. It's such an aggressive word.
It does feel a little aggressive. It does.
It's very punctuated. It's very like fag is like fag. It's very smooth.
It's
in
smooth. There, you know.
And even the full word faggot, it's still kind of like that soft F and G.
Yeah,
it's a hard G, but it's just a softer word. Dyke sounds aggressive. It sounds abrasive. It sounds like you're stabbing something or hitting something with a hammer. You're at Home Depot. You brought your U-Haul.
Your Jeep, and your new wife,
Fill it up with some diesel, you know.
Oh,
anyway,
Well, careful, because that would be diesel dyke. That's something different.
Yeah.
Moving on, today's episode topic that Matt is going to intro us in on is the one and only, we're so on brand and on time because it's a cultural moment that passed years ago.
Oh my god.
Game of Thrones. Let's talk about it, Matt.
Yes, so I've actually wanted to do this episode for a while. I just haven't gotten around to it. And we've had other things to talk about on this podcast. Lovely,
like the gay pipe.
The gay pipe, yeah, obviously. But I've wanted to do this one for a while because all three of us on the podcast currently did watch Game of Thrones. And we were I don't know about you guys, I was a pretty big fan of it. Would you guys say you were big fans of it or just fans?
I'm big fan.
Were you like, were you into it or were you just like, it's a good show?
I would say, well, I was into it and I thought it was a good show.
Okay. Got both on me.
Yeah.
So you're a fan.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
I definitely was a fan. Although I will say it took me like 5 different tries to get through the first season. But once I did.
Same, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Once I did, I was very on top of it. But that first season, 5 different times I restarted the first episode. So I was like, what happened? I missed it.
Yeah, the first season took me a while.
That leads nicely into my first question for both of you, which was, when were you first locked into the show? As like, this is a good show, I'm going to keep watching this.
Well, I remember, Matt, you actually forced me to watch it.
Forced?
And we would have watching parties. And I think we had some of them with our friends in college, too. And I would say it was probably after the first season where I was like, I think you and I watched the whole first season together. It was maybe into season 2, maybe, where I was like seeking it out on my own.
Yeah, we did have like little watch parties back when we were in college. I think that was when we were in like season maybe 6 or 7 we were doing that. Which is when, in my opinion, the show started going a little bit downhill. But we'll talk about that later. Pat, when were you like first hooked into the show?
I think I started watching it when like 3 or 4 seasons had already aired. I think the 4th season was airing, and I only really cared though when I got to season 3, basically, because I thought season 1 was fine. Season 2 for me was not good, just because it felt so long. Like the plot was cool, but like it just felt so long. But I think season 3 is really when I was like, I like care about these characters. I mean, also the moment I met Brienne and Podrick, specifically Podrick, I mean, and then they revealed that he has an amazing penis, and I was like, I'm not surprised.
What about his dumpy?
Podrick has a dumpy, although he wears a lot of big clothing and big armor, so you can't really tell. But Podrick has a dumpy. He's got a heart of gold. He's got an amazing penis, apparently. He's really good at sex, we found out in the show. So, like,
Work.
work. But yeah, it was really season 3, I think, that I was like, okay, I'm gonna like really watch this and pay attention and be involved in the cultural conversation.
Wow. I think for me, I got locked in probably the end of season 1 when they killed off Ned Stark.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
when I
that was
like,
the
what?
big thing.
Rest
Yeah.
in peace. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was luckily not spoiled on that at all, even though I think I started watching it when 3 or 4 seasons had also already been out.
Mhm.
So luckily I was not spoiled on that somehow. And that like got me good. And then I was like, ooh, this is going to be interesting. Like where could they possibly take it from here after Ned Stark dies? And I think that's what like drove me to continue watching it and seeing it through. However, we all know, and I have this in my notes, before we jump into the show's inevitable downfall, I want to talk about what made the show good and what made the show not as good.
Okay.
So here, I'll pose another question to the both of you. What was your like favorite part of the show? Not necessarily like your favorite scene or anything, because I'll do that one right after this one. But like, what was your favorite aspect of the show when you were watching it?
Ooh.
Uh, I oh I want to because I want to say some of the female characters initially
Yeah.
were portrayed very well.
Yeah.
However, by the end, some of those female characters were not, at least in my opinion as a man, through the male gaze, but trying my best to not do that, did not get the ending that I think they deserved or started making decisions, or the writers put the women in positions in that I did not like to see them in. But I think initially, the women, I was like, whoa. Like, even though it's a very misogynistic society still, which I don't know why it has to be. It's fantasy. Why can't it just be a
Yes.
society
Thank
where they
you.
all get along? But they need to have conflict, whatever. But even this misogynistic society, there was this sort of, women with autonomy like Cersei, like Catelyn, like Arya specifically, and then like Daenerys,
Brienne.
Brienne. Ugh, sad.
Oh.
But yeah, that's what I really liked initially. How about you, Jackie?
Well, I was actually going to say a non-story related aspect, which is kind of popped in my head, and I think it may be something that we wouldn't have touched on otherwise, but the production value was incredible for it, and that does kind of come with the benefit of being like an HBO produced show, and I think that it really lent itself to the show. I mean, even that opening sequence that they used was just so mind-blowing and iconic. Yes.
Still iconic.
And everyone, it's still iconic, and everyone knows, or who has watched the show, knows that theme song. And I think related to production, the costumes were incredible. They had some really, really beautiful things that they accomplished, especially with like Daenerys and some of the quote unquote higher ups. They did some really interesting choices related to story. I would say, like Pat, I found some initial world building aspects really intriguing.
Amazing. I also really enjoyed the production value, and the actors. Most of the actors were solid, like super good. Like Emilia Clarke, amazing.
Oh,
Peter Dinklage, amazing.
Amazing.
All of the favorites. Kit Harington, for the most part, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, he's fine.
He's fine. He's fine
he
to
really
look at.
is. I think the whole Kit Harington thing for me at least is like he didn't get a lot to work with.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
So I don't think he's a bad actor. I just think like the character didn't get a lot of room to really flex.
I liked his acting, but of course his character was kind of bland in general. But that was kind of his character.
Where's the flavor?
Where's the flavor? My favorite part of the show, though, my favorite part of it is that they had like all of these really good, complex storylines, all like kind of concurring at the same time, and they kind of really, they did it really well, in which they kind of interwove the storylines and made it kind of work out. They're telling one giant story from multiple perspectives, and they kind of weave it together really well. Like, you see how the entire world is moving along with these characters. So that's one part of the show that I really liked. And number 2, I love dragons.
Yeah.
And I also love story arcs about powerful women beating the odds. So, I really
But did they beat the odds?
Well, that's the thing, and that's where we kind of get to the downfall. But as the story was progressing, I really did like Daenerys' arc, at least in the first couple seasons, because dragons, powerful women overcoming the odds. I love it.
Yeah, we'd love to see it.
And now I'll ask, what was your favorite event? So, like, what's your favorite scene, I guess, of the show?
Oh.
I have a couple. I don't know what's my favorite, but like when Jamie pushes, what's his name?
Bran.
Bland. We're like
Bland.
All the men in that family are really bland. When he pushes him out the window, I assume he meant to kill him, right? Because he didn't want him telling anyone else that he was being in an incestuous relationship with his sister. That's just wild. Like a child.
It was a
what's worse than a rapist? A child.
Yeah. A child.
No.
No.
Which is a meme, by the way. That is not me saying that. For you who don't know meme culture.
Who killed all these children? It was me.
It was me.
I think that's a great scene. I think the Lady Olenna scene is great, where she's like, "Tell Cersei it was me." I think the Viper versus the Mountain is a great scene, where he just takes his head and crushes it like a watermelon.
Oh my god, devastating! That was devastating.
I think Cersei like blowing up the cathedral in the moment that Olenna's daughter and her brother, what's her name? Marjorie. What the hell's her name?
I think Marjorie
and Loras?
Her name.
Yeah, they're in the Citadel with the High Sparrow dude, and she's like, "Look around. Do you see Cersei here? Do you see any of her followers here? No, it's because she wants us here." And then everyone realizes what's happening, and then bam, they all blow.
The way they did all of the gay characters in that show so dirty. Can I say that?
Yeah, they really did.
Well, they did all of the gays and women dirty, really.
This is true. Did you notice the theme to all of Pat's favorite moments were just like horrible and tragic, and terrifying moments?
Yeah, tragic.
Fine, I'll pick a good one.
I mean, you live your truth.
No, I'll pick a good one just to balance it all out. I really liked when Brienne and Jamie bonded during their whole little
prisoner of war thing.
Yeah. I mean, it was completely nasty, the situation, in my opinion. Very disproportionate use of power on both sides. But kind of Brienne and him bonding, that Brienne was like, as a woman, I'm held to such a high standard as a knight, and I'm never taken seriously. And Jamie's like, everyone sees me as this Kingslayer, but in reality, like, it wasn't really that big of an event, and everyone now holds me to such a high standard because of it. So them bonding over like this sort of expectation versus reality thing was nice. See, it's not all death.
It's not all death.
Wow. What would be my favorites? Yeah, the Lady Olenna scene was one of my favorites. Daenerys. I think she had one. She had a lot of powerful moments, but there was one where I think she was liberating a city, and they kind of all like gathered around her, and I think literally lifted her up, and they did this incredible cinematic shot of kind of showing like above that and watching all these people
and they're calling her like mother or something.
Yeah, Misa, yeah.
Jar Jar Binks.
And we've come full circle. I'm trying to think of other moments too, but that one has always it's such a good scene.
Yeah, there are a couple of really good Daenerys scenes that stuck with me.
Yeah.
I think the one that stuck with me the most, which was my favorite scene, is they're in like the arena, and there's like a game going on, like a fighting to the death game. And then they get like ambushed by that like the Order of the Harpies or something like that. I forget the exact name. But they get trapped in the arena, and Daenerys is basically at that point accepted that she's gonna die. But then at the last second, the dragon comes in, swoops in, and saves her. After the whole season of the dragon like being a rebellious bitch the whole season.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, she kind of kept it in a cage for a while, and then.
Well, she never kept Drogon in the cage.
It was the other two.
It was the other two. Yeah, that one was just being like really rebellious, and I'm in my teenage rebellious phase.
Teenage dream.
We all have it.
And then coming in to save his mom. How sweet.
Yeah.
If only he could have saved her at the end.
Oh well.
Oof.
He did not, and then he burned the throne down for some reason.
No, he didn't. He didn't burn the throne down. He was just angry and expelled fire, and the throne just happened to be behind it. That's what the writer said, and I thought they were stupid for saying it.
That was a little bit of dumb.
Yeah, it was dumb.
Anyway, I had one more I have one more little note here, just like other aspects of the show during the initial seasons that I felt made it really good. I really liked like the whole concept of like a really complex political landscape, which is pretty true to this day, probably, like how our political landscape is really complicated. So you have all these numerous parties kind of vying for this one position of power. And everyone that's kind of vying for this power has their own backstories. And also these groups of people all have their own backstories and their own like motivations and reasons for wanting to have the throne. So, I just felt it was really, complex, and all the events always kept you on your toes, feeling like you never knew quite what was going to happen or quite what to expect. So I think that's what made a lot of the first few seasons really good, at least. And then later, I didn't feel that way as much.
Was there during kind of those peak seasons where we really got to see a lot of the political dynamics going on, was there any one house that you were really rooting for having the throne, or maybe just rooting for in general?
Yeah, I really wanted House Targaryen to come out as the lead, at least in the initial seasons. When it started being later, I was kind of like wavering back and forth a little bit in the later seasons. But definitely at first, I was like, I want Daenerys to burn Cersei to the ground and take that throne.
I mean, so close. So close.
Did you have one, Pat?
Not really. I mean, like, I really liked Dorne. Like, I didn't want Dorne to rule, obviously, because Dorne was its own separate country across the sea. But I did like that country, and I liked the
Snake ladies,
people.
Right?
The snake ladies and the viper dude. Like, Pedro Pascal's really hot, so that helped.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was openly bisexual and like a really cool fighter. Him dying to the mountain was very sad and traumatic to me because he was winning for a lot of the fight, and I was like, because it was wasn't it like a trial fight basically? Like if he won, someone else had to die, and then if the mountain won,
was it Tyrion's trial?
I think it was.
I think it was too.
Was Pedro fighting for Tyrion?
I think since he lost,
I'm sorry, whatever his name was in character. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I love Dorne. So I mean, I didn't obviously want them to rule, but I did love Dorne.
Yeah.
The whole plot line. But then it kind of fizzled out at the end, unfortunately.
I think like Matt, I was probably rooting for Daenerys the most. We just can't have it. We can't have a good female in power. It just Will's not ready.
That whole thing at the end, I think it's in the last episode. One of the lines is like, basically, I think it's the Varys or someone basically going like, the ruler needs a dick. Like that was the line, and I was like, ugh! It's like shut the.
I don't remember that. That's
Tyrion
so
said
gross.
Yeah.
Tyrion said it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tyrion? That doesn't feel in character at all.
And then, like, fucking that last scene during that round table thing where they, like, laugh about the idea of a democracy and it's pulled off as a joke. And I'm like, please don't do that. Don't get self-referential of, like, common day shit and then laugh it off as a joke. You guys are nasty.
Yeah. It got really gross.
Oh my god, that last season, which we will talk about in a little bit. Before we get there, we talked about what we liked about the show in general, disregarding the last season, because obviously I feel like we all have the same kind of feeling about what happened the last season. Trash. Disregarding the last season, what we didn't like about the show, kind of in general, before the last season, I have a couple points on my end. And I read about this a little bit. I was reading a lot of commentary about this show and how it kind of falls to a couple of different bad tropes. So firstly, the first thing that I read was that the Dothraki race in general is kind of like shown as these brute savages. Which in a way can be like kind of tied to certain cultural aspects of our own world and can be perceived as a little bit racist, just generally towards like, brown people and people of color. So I think that was a not necessarily good trope that the show kind of fell to, that I wasn't a fan of. What do you guys think?
I completely agree. I think that there's a way to show indigenous people or people of color where they're living their lives and it may not be the societal majority, but you don't have to show brutality. Those things do not necessarily go hand in hand, and I think that we just step right in that shit. We can't help it. We somehow know not to step in shit, and then we're just like, oh, what's that? Yeah, put my foot right there.
Ooh.
Right there.
It's like, yeah,
Every
I want to
time.
step in that. Yes.
Yeah, I want to get my new shoes all nasty. Yeah, like why? I don't understand it. Pat, what do you?
No, I agree. I mean, yeah, like there are savage groups of people. They don't have to be the people of color, obviously. And also, like, there are like nomadic types of people. There are all the cultures that aren't nearly as advanced as other cultures. What I didn't like, particularly about the Dothraki, particularly about Daenerys' relationship with Drogo, is that the show makes her fall in love with him genuinely after she is traded to him and he essentially rapes her.
Yep.
He consummates their relationship, the selling of her to him by having sex with her, and although Daenerys does not fight, you can clearly see on her face that she is not accepting, like she's accepting the situation because she has to. There's no consent at all, obviously. And that she genuinely likes him by the end, like names the dragon kind of after him, and then like reminisces later on in the show about him and how, she really misses him, kind of. Like how, she fell in love with the Dothraki people through him and through her time with them. Like, if she becomes empathetic to them during, her stay, fine, but like it's always going to be underscored and defined by her being sold into the group as a means of them getting the Dothraki people to support them. And I'm like, Dothraki representation is bad enough, and now we're having like what is being sold as like one of the last vestiges of this family who's going to take this throne back being sold as like cattle.
Yep.
And then raped.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes from bad to worse.
Yeah. So it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's
And
really bad.
I like understand what they were trying to do. But also, like, first of all, they didn't have to have Drogo rape her. Like, that was not in the books.
Didn't need it.
It was in the books, it was consensual, actually. Like, Daenerys is like, yes, let's do this. Maybe she didn't necessarily want to at that point in the books, but she definitely said, yes, I am allowing you to do this.
I don't think, I might be misremembering, but I don't think in the show it was consensual. At the very least, it did not read as consensual.
I was going to say, I don't remember, and I kind of remember this awful shot.
I remember.
And it was just awful.
It's like outside. Drogo's behind her. She's facing away, and you can see her face, and she's not living. She's not going.
Living. She's not living her. She's not saying that you're hitting it just right. No, yeah, I don't think she said that in. Was it common that they speak, or in Dothraki?
Yeah. No, she's in Dothraki. She just whispers like, "Hit it from the back."
Yeah. You're hitting it so right. Yeah, I don't think that happened. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure she was dead inside.
Yeah, Yeah. Yeah.
This is actually another point that I had about this show, because they glorify sexual assault more than once.
Oh yeah. That's
meaningful.
Yeah.
So many times. And like, I was reading about this too. There was an article that was just generally talking about like the men in this show and how all of them are portrayed as having like this hunger for sex that is just a craving that's just undesirable, not undesirable, it's fulfillable, insatiable desire for sex that kind of like just like drives their every behavior. And like that, for one thing, is gross. But also just the way that it influences the women in the show as well. Not only does it like kind of become part of their characters, it kind of ruins them a little bit. Like, I'll take Sansa, for example. Her sexual assault from Ramsay ends up becoming like her character almost.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that. Like, you can build strong women characters without subjecting them to sexual assault.
Yeah.
I didn't like
even the sexual assault for sure, but even just the actions of men defined the women characters.
Yes.
Like
exactly.
it was sexual assault, but like even just other decisions, because George R.R. Martin wrote a misogynistic fantasy world. So that was the rules he was playing by. So like every female character, most, if not some of their character plot is defined by the actions of men in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest downfalls for me, because what started off, it's always so disheartening, right? When you have like a fantasy show, especially as a female person, to find a fantasy show and kind of have the first disappointment of there being like, well, this is like clearly a misogynistic world. And then you kind of do find out that there are these badass female characters and they're trying to persevere. And then you just slowly chip away at that. Little by little, or in big, significant sexual assault cases where they are just like completely broken down as characters, and it no longer becomes an enjoyable and engaging show or experience or a world, and becomes almost a reflection of our world and something a little bit darker. And that's for me where it starts to really become not something I want to engage in. And I do completely agree with the sexual assault in that show, especially towards women, is just so just beyond frustrating and completely detracts from the show. And I think to Pat's point too, it's not even the sexual assault. It's like all these male-driven choices. You can see completely how they're shaping the world, and then how the women within that world like swim around those choices and decisions. And I don't like it. I don't like it.
I think like what was I saying? Like I'm not saying that if they had added sexual assault towards men, it would have been better. But if they had given the women sexual autonomy and had made decisions more so about themselves, then it at least would have been more balanced. It wouldn't have been good. It just would have been more balanced and more, at least, because in my, like we've said, like, it's a fantasy world. Like, why do people who write fantasy sci-fi things that obviously don't take place in the world, why do they still allow themselves to be constrained by what we are as a society? Like, I understand you need conflict, and sometimes conflicts, are very base level stuff, but like it's always the same shit.
It's the same shit. No matter what universe or multiverse or sci-fi reality you travel to, it's always the same shit. It's exhausting.
And I actually want to comment on something that Pat said about how you said there was no sexual assault against men, which there was, but it was glossed over completely.
Wait, is it Varys?
No.
Well, Varys was assaulted. His penis was removed.
That's true. That's true.
Well, yes, that did happen.
I'm sorry. Sorry
screen,
to that man's. Wait, let me think if I can remember it. Give me 1 second.
Wait, can I guess too? Was it the guy with the leeches?
Yes, that scene.
Yes.
Who?
Gendry.
Gendry, yes.
Oh, because he had his penis removed, right?
The
guy, the Reek. Reek was
Oh,
assaulted
that
as well.
That too. I forgot about that as well.
I forgot about that.
Okay, but let me say all of those were perpetuated by men.
That's
right?
true.
This is true. It's true.
No, so Gendry's was Melisandre.
You're right, Melisandre.
Who is Gendry?
He was the bastard of the king, the original king.
Yes, Baratheon's bastard.
Right, and he was just rowing then for like
he
4
was rowing
seasons
for 4
or something
seasons.
after. Yeah.
So I got it.
They give this character. They give this character like a sexual assault scene, basically, where the woman is the assaulter, and then not only do they make his character vanish, but it just like is not a defining part of his character. Which for the women, it's the defining factor. Always. But for the men, it's just like that. It basically is glossed over. It's like it didn't happen.
It's just a plot point. It's just like I went to the grocery store.
Yeah.
I was sexually assaulted. Like there's nothing. There's nothing.
I'm sorry, that's not funny, but it was kind of funny.
No, it is really funny. It is really funny. It's not funny, but it is. I can't look at. So I completely agree. There is not the same treatment.
I'm gonna have to put a trigger warning in front of this episode.
Yeah,
oh my God.
I was just thinking, oh God, this is not funny. But I was just thinking like, hey honey, did you pick up the eggs?
Sexually assaulted.
I'm gonna need to put a trigger warning in front of this episode.
Oh, for sure. Because this is like this Game of Thrones' fault. Blame.
Honestly, yeah, like trigger warning for Game of Thrones and anything therein involved, which includes everything they did. But like specifically for Sansa, her sexual assault completely changes her as a character.
Yeah.
She becomes way more emotionally detracted from things. She becomes way more cold and calculating. And I think it would have been so much more empowering if after it happened, if it had to happen for the writers, like if they're like, no, we gotta do this.
We gotta do it.
We gotta give her trauma. Like if afterwards she was able to like come back to, well, you can never get over that stuff completely, I'm sure. I don't know. But like if she had come back to some semblance of the character she was before and she was like maybe even more empathetic or like, you know, like showing her that she had not only dealt with it, but like didn't have to become like this very cold character. Because afterwards, she's kind of a bitch.
She's kind of a bitch.
Like there was that whole struggle between her and Jon during the last season about whether or not the North should be involved in this conflict or if they should just be like their own thing still. And I was like, you know, I feel like the old Sansa would have been very much, even though her and Jon Snow did not share any scenes together originally, which was kind of funny except for one. But it was, you know, like it just seemed like her character was like completely changed by that event. And I'm like, I would have liked it if she had like even more growth afterwards.
Yeah, and I think it's to kind of build upon what you said, Pat. It's not even about going back to, and I feel like that's a mentality that probably we as a society, how we deal with a lot of trauma, period. But especially when it comes to writing women, I think people get hung up on well, she can't go back to who she was, and like, no shit, how could you? It's about going forward, and that's when the really interesting things happen, both in life and out of life, pushing through it or working through it and processing and growing as a person, whether on screen or in real life.
Work.
I love this discussion.
Love to see it. Same.
Thank you. We really saved ourselves. Stop. That's what I was gonna. Stop. No, don't say that.
I can't.
Matt, move us on from here.
Go to the grocery store.
Just go to the grocery store.
No, okay. All right. Yes, I'm moving on. I think we talked about a lot of this. So I mentioned sexual assault in one of my notes, and how it's kind of glorified. I do also mention just like the general treatment of women is a little bit unappetizing in the show. Of women in the show is unappetizing in general.
It is.
What did I say?
You said the general treatment of woman.
A woman.
The one woman.
Oh, well, like woman.
Name a woman.
Name a woman for $1. It sounded like you meant there's one woman in the whole cast, and you didn't like.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised.
The general treatment of woman.
Woman. How do you feel about woman?
Name a woman.
Not great. After watching this show, not great.
No.
What
was your question?
It wasn't a question. It was just like a general note about the treatment of women in the show. So
it's not
from it's not good. Just in general, it's very misogynistic. But from my perspective, like if you look at certain characters, And I think for example, Brienne, I think it kind of works for her storyline because like that goes into like she's trying to overcome the gender role that she's been given as a woman, becoming a knight. That's like part of her story arc. So I kind of understand it a little bit more when it comes to Brienne, but for a lot of other characters, I was just like, "Oh, what are we doing here? What is happening?"
Yeah. And I think that's a good example and a good difference between characters where you have a character who is maybe not defined, but you can see that X event or X gender stereotype, whatever, is a core part of their identity, but it's not necessarily their whole kit and caboodle. And I feel like Brienne, if you look at Brienne versus if you look at Sansa and her trauma, it's like night and day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like Brienne is God, how do I want to say this? Like Brienne is trying to overcome, her like people perceiving her as a woman, obviously as a knight, and trying to overcome the gender stereotype. Whereas you have, um, a lot because Brienne does get, I think, a little less. I mean, she still gets traumatized. The whole bear thing was really rough. Brienne gets, I think, a little less traumatized than some of the other female characters, whereas they and the other female characters get, they operate more within the stereotypes. They operate more within man's world.
Yeah.
And it's a lot harder for them to overcome it because just the shit that gets thrown at them.
Mm-hmm.
So with Brienne, I think the plot is something I can, as like a gay man, empathize with a little bit more just because I'm like, oh, like I get it. Like trying to be something that society is telling you is not for your group, even though I'm a white gay man, so it's like very minimally I try to make that point a lot. But for, let's say, Sansa or Cersei or Catelyn, who just got straight up murdered, like those things I can't empathize with as much because I never experienced those things, obviously. And because it's just the brutality of them is so much worse. Like it's so much worse and more visceral that it's like what Matt said. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like,
right.
Like I get it. You're oh, men are like treating women like shit because that's what the society says. But like, what merit does it do to the plot? Like, where's the flavor?
Right, and then you kill them in the most brutal way. So then you're again chipping away at your female ensemble at these potentially really powerful women, and so you're left with like very few options. And then you have like one option in Brienne, who kind of becomes the scapegoat for feminism and bucking gender stereotypes. And it's so much pressure. And I think by the time we arrive at the end of the show, the already pressure building on the show as a whole, it just like fissured in so many immense ways.
Brienne and she could never live up to it.
Right. And we just get like these complete character choices that just don't make sense.
Oh yeah. I will talk about one more thing too. On top of this, I also read somewhere in some article that I don't remember. If I can find it, I'll put it in the description.
Right.
But the show seems to, in a lot of cases, perpetuate this weird stereotype in which if a woman experiences some sort of loss or trauma, they go insane.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And this has happened on multiple fronts. Like Daenerys, Cersei it happens to. Cersei loses her 3 children and kind of just goes batshit as well.
She just snaps.
It's not good.
No.
Yeah, yet Jon Snow can die and come back to life, and he's more or less fine.
Oh, yeah.
He still acts the same plain vanilla, just log face. Like, nothing there happened.
No.
And he lost his girlfriend. Like, he's gone through trauma, yet this character is unchanging, unwavering, and boring as hell, by the way.
What?
So white savior boring, if you know what I mean. White saviorism is a big thing. Hint Dothraki. With Daenerys coming in as this pale blonde goddess, saving them from their savagery and saving the brown nations from themselves and savagery.
Real quick on that note, like, we're in a fantasy land. Why couldn't it have been more diverse? I don't hear that you're in the north and you're pale. Don't give me that bullshit. Don't give me that.
Yeah, and like
White's only in the north. It's snow up here. Like, what? Get out
White's
of here.
only on that whole continent.
Honestly.
The brown people come from the other continent. I'm like,
and they're savages.
Are they
they're
at
savages.
the equator and they're not at the like what's the map we're working with?
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Anyway,
even if it made more sense to have like, oh, maybe the people from King's Landing are a little bit more colored if you're going with the north-south trope.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, fine. The North people and the wildlings can be considered like Canadian Greenland.
Sure.
That shit, fine. But like King's Landing and down there, like an olivey pigment.
Sure.
Something. A little bit of color.
And you're gonna tell me that like King's Landing and some of these port cities that have a ton of trade and travel don't have people of different diversities.
Oh,
Are there Asian people on the show? Like,
well, it's like maybe like Indian, maybe. But
what did you say?
Maybe like India, Asia, like Like
I genuinely don't remember if there were.
I know there was more like Middle Eastern-y.
There was,
pigmentation with like Dorn and Dothraki people and things like that. But I don't
think there was.
There was.
I'm not seeing a lot of color. I
don't see a lot of color. It looks pretty white to me.
Worse and worse.
Sorry. But Pat, you were talking about.
Oh, was I?
Something.
Wait.
So, loss. When women lose things, they go nuts.
Yeah.
I brought us back.
Yeah, so, Matt had said, like, when Cersei lost her kids, yet Jon Snow goes through these losses and goes through this drama, and he's totally fine. And, like, you have... Well, Varys is fucking weird. He lost his dick, and he's more or less fine. And he's in a position of power, actually.
Yeah.
Like, the men can go through trauma... And they're more like, even Jamie like goes through trauma-ish. He loses a hand. He like goes through a whole sort of comeuppance where you think he's on the road to recovery. And he's more or less fine. He doesn't go insane. He just loves his stupid sister.
He's fine. It's weird because I feel like in thinking about that, the show also perpetuates this. I don't know if you guys have noticed this or agree with this, but let me know. This perpetuation of motherhood defining female characters.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm trying to think of, like, the main ones I'm thinking of are Cersei and, what's her name? The House Stark leader.
Catelyn.
Yeah, like, I feel like those two things go hand in hand, and this goes back to just writing women like shit, where being a mother... for female characters in writing and in media, it plays this like huge role.
Yeah.
And we never see that same treatment to men. It's just like, well, yeah, I have a bastard.
And I have 8 bastards, yet Cersei's whole plot is defined by her children when she gets the fortune reading.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Like, her whole thing is like, my kids will die. How can I prevent that? And like, yes, it's true. Children are significant. I'm not saying they're not significant, but I'm saying that media portrayals focus on that and will fixate on that and how that impacts women and all these things where there is so much more to focus on and explore in not even just a woman, but in a person's life.
Yeah.
It happens to Daenerys, too. Like, a lot of her initial trauma comes from, her miscarriage.
I forgot about that.
Oh my god! I forgot about that.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
Right, and like the female Dothrakis are like by her trying to like fucking calm her down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A, there's that, and then B, they kind of make the dragons kind of like her surrogate babies after her miscarriage.
They all die.
Yeah.
And then most of them die too. All the dragons.
She goes insane.
Look at that! She goes insane. I mean, after what's her name? Missandei? Is that her name?
Missandei.
After that's her like her girl.
I think that's her girl. Yeah.
When she dies, I mean,
forget it.
That's really what sends her over the edge when she gets beheaded.
Yeah.
That was sad.
That was so sad.
That was very sad.
When she says, the shot is really good. Okay. The shot they did of that is really good, where it's really up close. Really, you hear her say the beginning of Dracarys, and it cuts to her very far away, and you just hear her get cut off, and her head obviously falls off. That shot's beautiful. I think some of the cinematography is very well. The writing, not so much.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, being that we're kind of marching towards season 8 now, and that we're at 50 minutes, let's do our feelings about season 8, basically.
Is that the
No.
last season?
Yes, season 8
No,
was
I
the
don't
last.
like it. I don't
Didn't like
it. I can sum it up with two thoughts really quick for me. One, the whole idea of men ruling and ruining Daenerys, hated it, disgusting, ruined a female character that could have been very, like, going against her blood, going against her gender, going against men and succeeding. You fucked it up. Two, only good thing about that season was Arya. Only good thing.
Only good
yeah.
thing.
Only good thing.
I still don't get the end of the plot. Like, I don't get so many things. What was the point of Bran? There's so many things I still don't understand with that show, and that's probably one of the most disappointing things is, like, the symbols. What were those about, you guys?
Oh yeah,
with the
like
bodies?
the White Walker symbols in the beginning. Yeah,
like,
what
those
were
were just little drawings in the snow.
Guys, I got bored with these bodies, so I just
What am I gonna do with them?
I made a little art.
They did so many good things, like the whole Hodor thing. The way that kind of culminated was amazing.
I thought that was incredible.
That entire build-up to that moment, that being Hodor's entire the reason for existence, basically. Yeah. I love that.
And having Bran be the one to fuck him up.
Yeah.
Like, Bran causing Hodor to become sort of mentally,
I
don't know, unstable / sort of, I don't know, like, disabled his life just so he could grow up.
Yeah.
And this just save him later. Like, completely using this man for like, just one thing. Like, awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
Awful, but like storytelling-wise, amazing.
Well, I love a good time plot, like a time loop thing. Like, that's always fun to play with.
It's really fun.
But yeah, Bran at the end though, with the Night King, the Night King being a completely useless villain.
He was so useless. That's another thing. Like, like Arya, I still understand it. What was the point? I don't get that. I don't get all these loose open ends. I don't get the terrible writing choices. I remember people complaining about the first episode. And I was actually okay with the first episode of the 8th season because it was a shorter season. I was like, you know what? I was actually okay with it because it was like this calm before the storm. It very much felt like that. And then it just all kept being like that with all these awful choices.
Yeah, the writing in particular, season 8, I was reading an article right after the finale came out, and someone was talking about how I'm going to bastardize this information. But basically, the idea was that since they used the books for so much of the early seasons, they were really piggybacking off of George R.R. Martin's writing. So while maybe the dialogue and like the shots weren't the same, obviously the themes and the character development were very pulled from the books. And since they didn't have that anymore for the last season, they only had those key plot lines that he told them about. They were kind of left their own devices. And they were saying that these two people, Weiss and Benioff were the two guys,
like that,
are not good writers.
They're not. I don't think
they're not good writers. Like, they are good, like, producers, directors, or just like sort of guiding hands. But the writing, they're not good at it. And you know, you get these sort of just fumblings at this last season because they couldn't write it well. And I'm like, you know what? The proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is shit. And I put my foot in it.
Yeah, I just stepped right in it. You must be really bad at writing if you, like, turned Brienne into the character that she became. Like, you had all this reference material, and you saw where the character was going, but then when you get to your part to write it, you just...
Goodbye.
You know, you threw all that stuff out the window. You're like, I'm going to be original.
A character who's trying to defy gender stereotypes, falling into the classic... I'm just like a girl who loves a boy. Like, you're leaving me for your sister again?
And
you know what she should have done?
Will you sleep with me?
She should have took out her sword, just fucking stabbed him and said, no, you're staying here, dead with me.
Stab him in the leg so he couldn't run away.
And throwing out Jaime's character arc too, just entirely.
Yeah.
Oh, this redeemable man. No.
Fuck him.
They made me like a man who fucked his own sister. And I was like, whoa, like, that's some really good writing. And then he went back to fuck his sister. And I was like,
again.
Again.
Oh, and her dying and they're holding each other. I'm
Oh,
like, get the
no.
fuck out of
No.
here.
The
No.
way they did Cersei's character dirty
Oh, they
with
did
that
her so
ending.
dirty. They did her so dirty.
She was such a good villain. Such a
was.
written villain.
I
Her
wanted
acting.
her
My God.
going out in a blaze of glory. If she was going to be
yeah.
psychotic,
Oh,
I
yeah.
wanted her
Let
to
her.
get burned alive by
Oh, yeah.
Drogon.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
a scene of her just getting engulfed in flames, dead. Not this whole
Love it.
hold me while the castle just falls around us. And then that shot afterwards of just like their body parts under the rubble to show they did die. I was like, fuck you.
Can you imagine if she had gotten like melted into the throne?
Oh,
you know, like
her skeleton,
Yes.
and then no one could have the throne anymore. Like she won because it was like her, like
Ooh.
melted onto the throne,
Yeah.
so she could always have it.
We
God's
should have
plan.
written the show.
That's
We
planned.
should have
God's
written the
plan.
show.
Plan.
We should
Yeah,
have.
we really should have. And I haven't even scratched into like the surface of Daenerys. They did her so dirty.
Oh my God. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Granted, George R.R. Martin may have written the way the books are going to go when they come out in 20 years, because he's never going to finish them.
Yeah.
When the ending comes, it's very well possible that he will take Daenerys into the crazy town direction. However, it's bullshit. And the way she was especially set up in the show does not jive with ultimately the direction that they took that character, and it's just so disappointing. So disappointing.
I think I've said this a couple of times, probably to both of you. I would have been fine with that ending. Like if the end game for Daenerys was she goes insane, burns down everyone, and needs to die at the end, and like she becomes the ultimate villain, I would have been fine with that ending if they set it up correctly. Like that was not set up properly. You did Daenerys complete 180 in her character basically in like 2 episodes. You need time to be able to build up that 180. Like, again, yes, she experiences some trauma. And then, of course, because she's a woman, when she experiences trauma, she goes insane. And, of course, she goes into her blood, right? Like, she ends up falling back on this idea. Her father was insane, so obviously she has to be insane.
Obviously. I think it's bullshit. I think that I would kind of, I guess, understand. No, fuck that. I'm not going to understand. I would probably not be a fan of it because I would place money on it that she would still go insane because of some womanly trauma, like losing the dragons, losing her friend, and
she was on her period.
You know what? It was her time of the month, you guys.
She was emotional.
Sorry. She didn't have her Starbucks today. I'm really sorry. Sorry
she
burned down the
did
whole village. She did. She left it in the scene. So I feel like the way especially women are written, their wrath or their downfall is never something I can quite follow or find relatable or justifiable enough to, especially on her level, just like snap and go into a literal burning rage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just, because I think about it, I'm like, okay, she's gone through a lot. Missandei just died. Dragons are dead except for Drogon. And she's seeing that the city doesn't love her for what she did. Like, she's looking around. She's like, oh my God, like, they're ungrateful, blah, 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 blah. I just think back to when she was in one of those other countries.
Yes.
And she liberated one of them. And, like, they were happy. And she basically co-signed that they kill all of the upper people. She had all the citizens putting them on pikes.
Yeah.
Pikes on pikes on pikes
great.
of just dead royals. And I'm like, see, that is the level of crazy she is. She will kill all the noble people, but she will free the citizens. Yes. That ending moment, she clearly did not, because she started blowing up buildings, random buildings. And it's just, and then she subjugated everyone at the end, obviously. So I think they pushed her to where she was meant to go initially because she was going through trauma. And then she got more trauma, but not anything worse than she had already been through. And then it's the complete 180. It's the shot of her on the dragon looking around. The bells are tolling. And there's that moment everyone knew.
Everyone knew. Here she goes.
But I was like, 2-3 seasons ago, she does almost the same thing, but stops herself because she knows, because of her experience with the Dothraki, with the people of God, I can't remember any of those countries out there. It's just too many. She liberated so many countries.
She did.
But she's the breaker of chains. She's the mother of dragons, the unburnt, whatever. She's not meant to kill innocent people, yet they were like, well, here
we are.
Here we go.
Clearly, she was meant to do it.
And yeah, the whole what's the word I'm looking for? The whole sort of like catch being that, well, her dad was crazy, her family was crazy, so of course. And I'm like,
of course, because she's an incest child, so she's gonna be crazy.
I'm like, Jon is part Targaryen. He's not insane. He's the most boring fucking guy in the whole 7 kingdoms.
Yeah.
God. Not to mention he fucks his aunt.
I was okay with that. I know people had a huge like plot point with that, but like really now we're taking issue with like incest. Is that?
Oh, I didn't care. Yeah, because I've seen Cersei get banged by her brother like every other episode.
Oh my God.
The whole him fucking Daenerys thing wasn't weird, but it was just like that's the craziest thing Jon did. That's his crazy Targaryen blood.
Yeah,
he just couldn't help fucking his aunt.
That's his summer camp that went really wild.
Yeah.
That's where his character,
counselor.
His character took a turn there. It was just like he went from at least having some flavor in the north, where he was like leading the wall people. What are they called? The wall.
The
Night Watch.
Shadow?
The Night's Watch. Yeah, the wall people.
Yeah. The wall people.
Yes, the Night's Watch. He at least had some flavor there. As soon as they start making him fuck Daenerys, he lost all flavor. Like he just became oh my God, I love Daenerys. Whatever she says is right. That's the only thing that his character became.
He kind of stops participating. If I remember correctly, he kind of stops participating in the world going on around him and kind of those plot points there.
Until he has to kill her.
And bend the knee, which he won't do. It's just like,
Bend the knee. How do you bend over?
I miss all those bend the knee.
Hey, Auntie, how about you bend over again, and I'll show you what I'll do. I'll pledge my allegiance.
Hello? All right, last thing I want to talk about.
He fucked his aunt, all right? He fucked his aunt.
Okay, there it is.
We could probably talk about Daenerys' ridiculous ending for ages. But last thing I want to hit on is how...
Oh, hit on.
Hit on both of you, because you're so cute, both of you. Last thing to hit on. After the ending, obviously most people thought it was terrible. And what I thought was so interesting is how this show was like ingrained in society, in our culture. Like, if you didn't watch Game of Thrones, you were weird. Like, you were the outcast if you didn't watch this show. And then the ending happened, and this show vanished. Like, we're in a different timeline, basically.
It disappeared.
Yeah.
Like, what happened to the ingrained, the society around Game of Thrones, the culture around this show just...
I will make a perfect metaphor here, and I'm so sorry. Because it's perfect. Yet no one's going to like what I have to say.
Uh-oh.
It is Game of Thrones ending, and that disappointment afterwards is the orgasm that just doesn't hit. It's the finish that just, you look around, you're like, that was what I was working for? Like, that's what I stuck around for? Like, the show didn't finish strong. It finished with the and that was it. And it's like, I was at this for an hour and 15.
You know what?
Supersized episode worth, and that's all I get?
I think that's actually a really good metaphor.
They were just edging us for 8 seasons.
Oh, yeah.
Just tied us to the bed, nipple tassels, hot wax, tongs, fucking magnets. There's like Jacob's ladder in the corner going up and down. Just teased, edged to the limit of sanity itself, and then just... I think
you killed
it really...
Jackie. I think you killed them.
Went to the grocery store afterwards and got some eggs.
To the grocery store afterwards.
Stop it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just like, there was just so much hype and so much build up and just so much like, just the Reddit's filled with theories on how it's going to end.
Yeah.
And it could never live up to it because it had grown to critical mass and the writers just couldn't keep up with expectations. So it was like, on to the next best thing, because that's streaming culture now. It was like, it's like the Sopranos ending. Like, people saw it and they were like, what the fuck was that? And then Sopranos was out of the zeitgeist because it was over and it was dumb and it was gone.
Oh my god.
It is really weird though, whereas I feel like Sopranos, you still hear about Sopranos because it's still very well respected, and as a whole probably had stronger writing. I didn't watch the whole thing. But Game of Thrones, it's like this fun slide where, you get to the top and then you slide down and you realize it was like a kid slide and you're like, oh, well, okay, we're done here.
Okay,
bye.
we're done.
Goodbye.
And literally, like, no one talks about it. Or when you do bring it up, I remember this happening multiple times, you would bring up the errant, like, Game of Thrones joke and people roll their eyes and they're like, let's just not talk about Game of Thrones.
Yeah, no one says like, what is Jon Snow saying? Or like, you know nothing, Jon Snow. Like, nobody says that anymore.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Yeah, I feel like now the moment you bring up Game of Thrones at all, someone immediately says, oh my god, like the way it sucked how it ended, like is that what we're talking about? Like that's always the topic now. It's not
always the topic.
Do you remember like the complex geopolitical interrelationships between the countries of the Seven Kingdoms? Like wasn't that so representative of our
really
nation?
Cool, you guys?
It's more like, can you believe that Daenerys went like insane and he fucked his aunt? Like,
can you believe they fucked us on this show? Like they just fucked us over and fucked us out of a good show.
Oh my god. Yeah, I remember saying, like, prior to the ending, if someone asked, like, oh, should I watch Game of Thrones? I'd be like, yes, Game of Thrones is so good. Now, if someone asked me today, should I watch Game of Thrones? I'd be like, no, there's no point. There's entire point of the show, like, when you have a show like Game of Thrones, where everything culminates in the climax of the show or whatever the ending is supposed to be, like, the whole point of the show is who's going to end up on the Iron Throne. Like, that's, like, the whole point. When you have it end so terribly, there's no point in the entire show. Like, there's, like, you would even say, like, oh, maybe just watch the first couple scenes. Like, no, if you watch Game of Thrones, you have to watch it to the end, and the ending was terrible, so there's no point.
Even if Bran's on the Iron Throne at the end, right?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, he is. Bran is the king at the end.
And then for some reason, he can't, like, pardon his brother, and he's like, you have to be exiled to the north. I'm sorry. People will get mad if you're not.
Oh my god, you're right.
And Jon Snow was like, you're right. I'll go back up there. I'm like,
okay. Wow, here I was going to say, you know, even if the ending were poor or controversial, like Sopranos, you could still have a fantastic journey to arrive at whatever that conclusion is. Game of Thrones fuck themselves so hard in those, like, middle seasons. So even if the last season had been bad, whatever, maybe you can still watch it. It starts, there's like one meme that always floats around, and it's the horse drawing meme.
Yes.
Of how comprehensive and how well Game of Thrones is from the early seasons to the last season. And for anyone who hasn't seen the meme, it's basically, it starts off with season 1, and you can see the part of the horse is like anatomically perfect. It's so well drawn. And by the time you arrive at the part of the horse that's drawn for season 8, say like the head, it looks like maybe a kindergartner drew it. It's just it's just, you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah, from ass to mouth, the horse starts really great, and then by the time you reach that mouth, what's that mouth do? Nothing, because that mouth is fucked up.
Nothing. Good going, shit lips. Well,
good going.
I gotta stop eating ass. We didn't have shit lips.
What?
Hello.
Oh, so I don't know, Matt. Are you gonna bring up the prequel series at all?
Oh, go ahead. I wasn't going to bring it up, but
go ahead. Did you guys see the teaser trailer for it?
I think I did, but I have not seen the actual show.
I did not.
Exactly. So this is what I want to say. The teaser trailer dropped unceremoniously, and no one gave a shit. And the prequel's about the House of Targaryen before its fall. You got a lot of whiteys back there with blonde hair again. And it's really about their house and, like, dragons and shit. And no one cared. Like, I watched the teaser and I'm like, okay, it looks like Game of Thrones, cool. But
actually,
like, it didn't hit like a viewer count thing. It was just very sort of like a fart.
No.
What's it called? Teaser trailer?
House of Dragons? Maybe? I think it's called.
House of the Dragons. I actually will say, and I remember seeing this on Twitter, that there were people of color featured in the trailer. And honestly, probably more people of color featured
I just meant
in this than there were probably the whole series.
I just meant Targaryens or whiteys.
Right.
There were people of color with the white hair. I don't know if they were Targaryen.
Okay, Bexel test. Okay, diversity.
Yeah, I saw, I think it was Abria Iyengar on Twitter. that's how I like knew that the trailer was up, because she was commenting on it and saying, essentially, as a person of color, like, this is really exciting to me. I was like, oh, okay.
Nice.
I'm cautious
Yeah.
about it. I mean, I will watch it when it comes out, whenever it does. Who knows? Fucking COVID probably delayed it and that shit. But like, I'm cautious about it just because A, it's a prequel, so like, why the fuck does it matter?
Right.
But also, I'm cautious because the Targaryens are historically crazy, apparently. Am I just gonna get a lot of crazy plotline with people just killing and fucking their cousins and their brothers and sisters? And I'm like,
I don't think I'm gonna watch it. I don't think I'm gonna watch it.
I'll watch it and I'll let you know about that.
Yeah, you can let me know. But I honestly don't think. I think the last season did me so dirty. I honestly don't want much to do with the show anymore, except to do this episode about where we rant about it. Obviously, you can go back to my old room at my parents' house and just look around, and you'll see all the Game of Thrones merch. That's how into the show I was before the ending. Now get that shit away from me. I don't want
I remember
any of that.
Burn it in effigy and ceremony. Do all that shit. Cleanse it, sage it.
No, I don't want it. I don't want it.
I made you Game of Thrones coasters, and I'm like, cool. That was a present. Like
Oh yeah, that was so nice though. That was very nice.
But you can't use them.
You could repurpose them. You could repurpose them. You could dip them in paint and cover up all the sin. Put funny, I don't know, drawings.
Cover up the sin. Maybe of a person fucking his aunt.
Maybe we should just start a fire one day and just burn all my Game of Thrones stuff.
You know, we honestly could.
I could jump in it afterwards for fun. You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Let me go. We're at an hour and 11 minutes. So
listen. Okay, I'm not constrained. Matt likes to be constrained by time. I don't like to be constrained by time.
Why do you like time ruling you, Matt?
Oh my God! Listen, I'm trying to keep this nice and succinct for our podcast listeners who
don't.
It's a podcast. We got Jackie on. We're gonna have a moment, and I'd like to, before we wrap up, I just want to say one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Speaking of the treatment of women, in a fantasy show, I just want to say, and Jackie's watched it, so Jackie knows. The show Arcane on Netflix heavily features women of color. Heavily features them because they're the main characters of the plot. There are male characters.
They're doing their own thing.
Yeah, there are male characters, obviously, but the two main characters are sisters, and they have autonomy. Well, for the most part, there's a little bit of messiness. Yeah. There is trauma, but by the end, they are both, I think Jackie will agree, individual people who have kind of come into their own about who they are, and the animation style is amazing. And the more people who watch it, the more money you'll get Riot to make another season, because they're gonna make another one. And that show, that show is a good orgasm. You've been edged for 8 episodes, and when you hit episode 9, it's a start to minute climax. You have I turned into a woman and had multiple orgasms during that last episode.
Wow.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, let's save it for when we do a podcast episode on Arcane, which I think we want to.
Yeah, because someone has to watch it.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into
I wonder who that is.
I couldn't say who.
So this has been another lovely episode of the What Do the Gays Think podcast. Once again, joined by the illustrious Jackie. You can follow Jackie on Twitch at Jackie_the_bananas. You can follow them on Twitter at King_Jacqueen.
Yep. Nice.
Got it. JAKWEEN for Jacqueen. They stream games like we stream the What Do the Gays Think Twitch, or What Do the Gamers Think Twitch.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
I'm so sorry. We stream very similar content, although we don't stream very often right now. Spooky games, co-op games, fun things like that, and follow them on Twitter for fun stuff.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Do you have anything you want to plug really quick before we
no, I think that was it. That summed it up nicely. Love being here, being queer, being on the podcast.
I love mansplaining Jackie's content for the viewers.
Well, I'm just a feeble woman.
How am I going to do anything?
And I don't even know my own plot points.
We have a Twitter, WDTGT Podcast. You can get all of our updates for our episodes, our streaming, any content we produce. We have a Redbubble, which is at the link tree in our Twitter bio if you want some merchandise. I think that's it. I'm joined once again by Matt, of course. Anything else to say, my dear?
No, I think you did that very nicely and very lovely.
I was holding in a burp the entire time. I'm so sorry.
Oh.
Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up. I am Podrick's huge penis, Matt.
And I'm disappointed because that orgasm just did not hit after 8 seasons of edging. Patrick.
And I'm riding on the back of the dragon, burning down the entire continent. Jackie.
Because you were on your period.
I can't help it, okay? I need chocolate.
I just want to say this podcast, we support women and women's rights and feminism in general. Thank
This
you.
is
Agree.
This is farcical.
Yes.
Come on, everyone. This is farce.
Like,
You know, when I said dyke before, it was completely in farce. It was obviously
It's consensual. It's consensual.
It's an open dialogue. We'd like to have those here.
Yep.
All
But
right.
really, women who are listening to this, get back to the kitchen. I mean, like, what are you doing?
Jackie says that. Not Matt and I do not co-sign that sort of language. I don't have any women in my kitchen except for me, I guess.
Well, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.